Hi, Anna.
Hey, Shay. How are you?
Tired.
Yeah, end of semester syndrome?
Yep.
I'm sure you're not alone. Raise your hand or like the episode. I don't know if you feel like you're at that point, at that breaking point where you just don't want to teach anymore. I think we've all been there, right?
I'm there right now. Actually, listeners, I'll be honest. Before we started talking about this, all I was doing was complaining about my schedule and my classes and my students. Now, that's not to say that I don't love them, but it is to say that my attitude towards them at this time of the semester in particular is maybe a little bit more negative than I'd like it to be.
You started the countdown to the end of the term, right? I know what you mean. During the first few weeks of class, all you do is brag about how interesting and brilliant your students are. And then
you tack on another 4 weeks or so, and I've started to stress out about minor interactions, pull my hair out, lose sleep.
It's interesting how the dialogue shifts in that way. But I would say that it's pretty normal, this sort of seasonal slump. Essentially, every teacher I know experiences this burnout in one way or another.
But to what extent, right? I think that when you start to dread your work or anything related to your work, you've crossed into new territory. Perhaps one where you begin to consider whether you even chose the right profession.
Yikes. Yeah, totally. And so today we'll explore different points along this spectrum of disenchantment.
What do you do when you've lost your zest for teaching?
Hello, and welcome to the Teacher Think-Aloud podcast, a podcast for reflective practice for teachers of English around the world. I'm your co-host, Anna.
And I'm Shay. Anna, first things first. Let's define what we mean when we say zest for teaching. Some people might be thinking of zesty pickles or the outside of a lemon or lime.
Right, that zest of an orange that you put in a Manhattan or the lime that goes into a Moscow Mule.
We always land on cocktail references.
We do, but seriously, when we look up the word zest in the dictionary, we find great enthusiasm, energy.
Right. So when we ponder whether we have lost our zest for teaching, really we're questioning whether we've lost our passion for what we do. Do we still bring that new teacher energy to the classroom, to our lesson planning?
I would say that new teacher energy is hard to maintain.
For sure.
So it's important for us to think about how we can shock our systems back to life, revive our zombie teacher selves, and find that passion again.
Zombie teacher selves. I love that. Anna, earlier we touched upon how seasonal or temporary burnout is super common, arguably inevitable for the great majority of educators.
Yep. So today we're here to bring you quick fixes.
Oh.
I'm totally kidding. Quick fixes don't exist.
Right. It's a lot more complicated. We're functioning within a system that considers everything but our mental health, I think.
I'm so glad you brought that up, mental health. Cult of Pedagogy by Jennifer Gonzalez recently did an excellent episode on teacher burnout and what needs to change. She posted a question on Twitter about what can be done to make this year better and collected all this feedback from teachers and then synthesized it into a podcast episode about how teachers are burnt out and don't even have time to think about their mental health.
Yeah, it's a real problem. If I recall correctly, she highlights that there's a lot of teacher training or people preaching mental health without actually giving teachers the space and time to address their mental health. So it is a larger systemic challenge, but one I think teachers can take into their own hands to a certain extent.
I agree. I think the most common reaction to hearing someone say they're overwhelmed or overworked is to say, take a break. But we know that teachers don't necessarily get to take a break whenever the mood strikes them, right? And even designated breaks, quote unquote, are filled to the brim with all of the things they couldn't get to when they were in the classroom. So let's just take these full-on breaks off the table. What do you do to nurture yourself without a break, Shay?
Well, for me, these full breaks are certainly few and far between, but tending to my mental health is a practice that I take very seriously. So I like to use this brain break concept to keep up my morale and my energy. And let's qualify. I don't mean taking a vacation or even an hour to just sit and chill, but I take a moment to interrupt my frustration loop about what went wrong in my lesson earlier and instead pause to reframe. I think about what went well, what has caused me to feel excited or fulfilled as of late, a student's aha moment, or a piece of positive feedback that I've received.
This sounds a bit like gratitude journaling. That simple act of pausing and reflecting on what you're grateful for has roots in mindfulness, the concept of being present and conscious about what you're feeling in the moment. Taking a second to check in with your current experience and tap into those positive feelings you're having can support your mental health in the classroom. There's actually a lot of research about mindfulness and its place in the classroom right now.
It's very similar, absolutely. And while I personally find it helpful to jot down my ideas, I don't want listeners to feel like they have yet another task to add to their to-do lists. You can totally just sit with those positive thoughts, pat yourself on the back for doing something well, acknowledge the little wins, and let this mini celebration shift your mindset a bit.
Mini celebration. I can see how returning to this practice on a regular basis can inspire different thoughts related to your role. Perhaps remind you of why you got into the profession in the first place. Actually, that's something I would recommend zooming in on. If you haven't already, sit down and write down your motivations for entering the teaching profession in the first place, if you can remember them. Or maybe revise them. Update your list to highlight the parts of your work that you enjoy.
Nice. Another important piece of maintaining my calm, right? My semblance of calm is looking for inspiration. Perhaps it's just a post by someone I admire on teacher Twitter or other social media, or an awesome teaching tip from a colleague or at a conference. Indulging in a little self-guided professional development really nurtures me when I'm feeling disenchanted.
Yet another item on our long to-do list, but yes, I totally agree. Listen to a great presentation. Go to a conference. Like, we recently went to a regional TESOL conference.
Yes, WASOL, the TESOL Association in Washington State, USA.
Yep, that one. And we were so freaking energized after a couple of the talks that we went to.
Woo!
I mean, and yes, conferences are hit or miss. You don't always get what you want. Conferences are like a box of chocolates. Some of them are great and have like caramel sea salt in them. And some of them are ones that you'd like to spit into your hand.
Yummy. So, yeah, if you get that caramel sea salt or whatever you like, whatever floats your boat, that can really energize you.
And it doesn't have to be a conference because, conferences cost money. You might not always get the funding. But there are also lots of great free events or just videos of people doing presentations, especially now that we've moved into this online sphere.
Right. So ask yourself, what are the things that you're really interested in exploring on your own that maybe you don't have time to do or are not the focus of, your district's PD? Tap into that and see what you can, what kind of exploration you can do on your own. That is, of course, when you have the energy to do so.
Right. And it doesn't even have to be as big as a conference. This self-driven PD could be like listening to your favorite podcast while you're in the car or while you're on the subway and just kind of being inspired, letting yourself take something from it and move forward.
I think that we need to feed our souls before feeding our students, right? That constant serving of others can be draining. So here we are coming back to this idea of filling your cup and taking care of yourself and your needs first.
And speaking of filling your cup, meet with a colleague and have coffee.
Oh, nice.
I'm a huge proponent of establishing and maintaining a community of practice. Get together and have an informal conversation about what's going well for you and what's not. Because I do think that, uniting over shared challenges can be energizing because it makes you feel like you're not alone.
Yes, but don't dwell on the negative too much either. Like, yeah, you have to process the negative, but if you dwell on it, really sit with it and ruminate on it, or you get into the cycle of complaining about it, And I don't want to say that you don't have anything to complain about, because you certainly have a lot to complain about. But we all do, right? But getting into this cycle, and especially an echo chamber of, well, everyone is unhappy and that's all we've ever talked about, I think can be problematic.
We're greatly impacted by who we surround ourselves with, aren't we? This makes me think of the teacher break room. It can certainly house some negativity, can't it? And so just kind of take a moment to reflect on who it is that you're surrounding yourself with, and whether you know the conversations you're having are adding to the negativity that you yourself are already holding. I think that can exacerbate the problem.
Absolutely. So in seeking out community, expand your network and pull in positive voices that remind you of what's so exciting about the work that you do. Find a new teacher friend. A new teacher, too. I mean, find new teachers who are excited about being in the classroom. Surround yourself with teachers who are passionate, just, the zestiest.
Yeah.
Because I think that there's energy that you can pull from that, right? Passion can be contagious.
And Shay, that's why I love working with you,
Ah,
Yeah. So, okay, these are a few great tips for tackling that seasonal slump. Practice gratitude, reflect on why you got into the profession, watch or listen to an inspiring presentation or podcast, find a supportive community. These are quick-ish fixes for getting your zest back, but sometimes you're dealing with more than just the end-of-term blues. Sometimes your loss of passion isn't temporary, but rather recurring, a nagging sentiment that leads you to believe that your passion for your profession has been depleted, so much so that you're considering quitting.
Yes, it happens. So the first step, I think, is to stop and wait for it. Reflect. You guessed it. Yeah. So I think you have to conduct a needs assessment if you find yourself in this position. Is it everything about your work that you dread, or just a responsibility or two? Are there any small changes that you can make that would lead you to feel less frustrated or even more fulfilled?
I think it's a good idea to do an inventory before jumping ship and figure out what your goal is. Think about what you ideally would want to do. Is there some way you could do that within the school or the confines of where you work? Maybe you can talk with your supervisor to say, hey, I'm really interested in this if anything comes up.
You could also ask to teach different content, something that encourages expansion of mind and intellectual growth. Like myself, I was a bit fed up with teaching pure language, and I really wanted to expand into content areas, especially intercultural communication and things of that nature. So I asked, and that's what my focus is now.
Ask and you shall receive.
Maybe.
And if you don't have the experience to reach that goal, that area of interest yet, then you may need to do a bit more work before your supervisor actually sends those projects your way.
Yeah, it won't just happen automatically. You need some level of background, of course. But having an honest conversation, both with yourself and with your supervisors, is a great first step. So don't just wait for a new opportunity to present itself. Is there something that's going to pull you out of your state of stagnation, reinvigorate you? Seek that out.
And on that same note, another thing I think is useful, particularly maybe when you don't know what feels right, what's next, is to explore. Like, Shay, earlier you asked whether your entire job is frustrating or just pieces of it. I know you're speaking from recent experience, right?
I am. And I'll use myself as an example and hope that none of my directors listen to this episode, because they certainly won't be extending an offer next semester. Sorry guys. But I look forward to the days that I have, content creation, and when I have script writing, when I have even office hours, that opportunity to connect one-on-one, anything that's not direct classroom instruction time. I find myself really looking forward to and savoring those moments.
And I think, there's always part of the job, no matter what job, that you're not going to like. So I think it's a lot about weighing the highs and lows. But yeah, if you're dreading going to the classroom like every single day for a long period of time, then maybe it's time for a break.
Absence makes the heart grow fonder. That's what they say. And I can see how if I were to take a break from classroom teaching and focus my attention on curricular design or content creation, writing for an educational blog, whatever it may be, I might feel re-energized to enter the classroom again in the future.
It can seem scary to quit your teaching job, but I mean, you can always come back to the classroom. I started my career with teaching, then went into educational publishing and assessment, and then came back again. After 4 years away from the classroom, I was like, I need to be with the people that I'm affecting. Let's do this. Let's get back in the classroom.
And switching gears doesn't mean that you're abandoning your profession.
No.
It doesn't mean you're abandoning your teacher skills even, because a lot of those things come across in different ways, right? The way you run a meeting, the way you engage your colleagues, the way that you structure a workshop. It comes across in different ways, all of these skills, and you can always come back to it because that skill just isn't going to go away.
Hire teachers, people. They have so many skills. And in the end, you may find that when you tap into those other avenues, you notice a better fit for yourself. So maybe you don't make your way back to the classroom, and that's okay too. You can be a program manager like I am now, an editor, a translator, an instructional designer.
The possibilities are boundless, teacher friends. So if you've lost your zest for teaching, and we mean like really lost it, check out our resource page for ideas for your next chapter. And no, you're not alone. We've all been there. This doesn't have to be an existential crisis, right? You are going to go on and do cool things regardless.
Indeed. So teachers, we want to hear from you. How do you keep your passion for teaching alive despite everyday challenges and points of frustration?
And how can you tell if your disenchantment with the craft is temporary and burnout inspired, or an indicator of a lack of fulfillment or misalignment with your future goals?
You can join the conversation on our various social media accounts. Email us via our contact form at teacherthinkaloud.com or comment via Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube. We welcome your reflections, questions, and ideas.
And we also welcome your donations. If you're feeling in the spirit of giving this holiday season, we hope you'll consider donating to our podcast so we can keep the episodes and the exploration of these complex topics going.
For more resources related to today's topic, take a look at our website and our podcast anchor page, anchor.fm/teacherthinkaloud. And to make a donation or buy some podcast swag, head over to teacherthinkaloud.com/support-us.
I don't know why I always have to say swag like that. Thanks so much for joining us on the Teacher Think Aloud podcast. And until next time, happy teaching.
And happy reflecting.